Well, hey there, America. How are you? Happy Independence Day. Or as some prefer, happy 4th of July. Personally, I'm partial to Independence Day. That's just me. I don't say happy November 26th. I say happy Thanksgiving. I don't say happy December 25th. I say Merry Christmas, but far be it from me to judge. This is a holiday-inspired version of the way I heard it. I just wrote it moments ago, and I just spilled some beer on it. If you like it, you can listen to more over at micro.com/podcast. If you don't, this is happening one way or the other, so you might as well listen. It'll be over in 5 minutes. Ready? John's a farmer in Hopewell, New Jersey. Like many working farmers, John feeds lots of Americans who have absolutely no idea where their food actually comes from. But unlike many of his peers, John is not struggling to make a living. Far from it. John is prospering. In fact, John is downright rich. So too is Frank. Frank made his money doing whatever it is international businessmen do. Something to do with the mercantile exchange. He was born in Wales and educated in the very best schools. After becoming a legal citizen of this country, he made an absolute fortune. Now he employs more people than he can keep track of. And then there's Richard. Richard is one of the wealthiest lawyers in America. He studied law at Princeton, which his ancestors helped build, and worked under the Honorable David Ogden of Newark. He sits on the bench of the New Jersey Supreme Court, where his reputation as a jurist earns him the respect of politicians on both sides of the aisle. Not long ago, John, Frank, and Richard sat down with dozens of other wealthy Americans at a private men's club in Philadelphia to discuss, among other things, the future of the country and our current tax code. Not only do these men believe their taxes are way too high, they feel their money is being squandered by America's leaders. They're also offended, deeply offended, by the continual assertion that they are not paying their fair share. John, Frank, and Richard listen attentively as a number of powerful men address the group. They talk with great passion about the need to elect a leader who will stop dividing the country. Ultimately, the men draft a manifesto outlining their concerns and announcing their refusal to keep paying taxes to an administration they believe to be corrupt. John, Frank, and Richard each sign the manifesto, along with everyone else in the room. Then they send it off to the largest media outlets in the country and go home to see what might happen next. Well, they don't have to wait long. In the halls of power, America's leaders are livid. How can these wealthy men who have enjoyed so much good fortune complain about paying a little extra for the good of the country, they say? Do these elitists seriously think they could have possibly prospered without the government's help? Maybe it's time to teach these guys a lesson. And so they do. When Frank arrives home at his mansion in New York, it's been thoroughly looted. Armed troops now occupy his estate. They're confiscating everything of value, including his wife. They locked her up for months with little food or water. Didn't even give her a change of clothes. Frank went mad with worry and panic. They let her out, eventually, and then she died. John doesn't fare much better. The troops have occupied his farm in Hopewell. They refuse to relinquish it. John learns the occupiers have orders to execute him in the town square. Recently widowed with 12 children, John is now a wanted man. He goes into hiding, moving from place to place under the cover of darkness, and lives on the lam for the better part of a year. Eventually, the stress kills him. Richard's wealth and status make him an even bigger target. Armed men barge into his home and drag him from his bed in the middle of the night. He's locked up, starved, and tortured. Richard survives, but never really recovers. His vast fortune is stolen, and he spends his final days utterly dependent on the kindness of friends. John Hart, Francis Lewis, Richard Stockton. If their names don't seem familiar, it's probably because they've been overshadowed by other men who signed the same manifesto. Men like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, men whose names are now preserved for posterity on the bottom of that troublesome document that so enraged the occupiers in the red coats. Unlike most revolutions, ours didn't start with an angry mob armed with pitchforks and guillotines with absolutely nothing to lose. That was France. Our revolution started because 56 very wealthy men with everything to lose put everything on the line for a country that didn't even exist yet. The internet is full of grossly exaggerated accounts of what happened to the original signers, and that's too bad, really, because the truth of what actually happened back in that exclusive men's club in Philadelphia, also known as the Second Continental Congress, is remarkable enough with no embellishments at all. Those 56 men, those one percenters of 1776, they could have easily paid whatever new tax was being demanded by their king. They could have easily lived out their lives in comfortable peace. But they didn't. They chose liberty over safety. When they signed that manifesto, they weren't just declaring their independence. They were signing their own death warrant. And when they pledged their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor, they weren't just making a pledge to the King of England or to each other or to the rest of their fellow colonists. They were making a pledge to you and me. And they kept it. 240 years later, as the hot dogs plump up on the grill and the condensation forms on another bottle of cold beer and the fireworks explode overhead, their pledge and their courage are still worth remembering and celebrating. Anyway, that's the way I heard it. So, happy Independence Day. Or the 4th of July if you prefer, but let's be honest. It's Independence Day.